Hey everyone, and welcome to another tutorial from Blender Amigos. We're just gonna go through some basic. It's basically like a crash tut, where I'm just gonna be introduced some basic concept of Blender. So what I have here, well, better introduce what it's about. Today we're gonna be talking about pivot points and the 3D cursor and how they are similar and different. So here I have my Suzanne monkey, a blue one. And you can see here when I select her, I got a blue, not blue, orange dot in the middle of her. So this is like her geometric center. So basically, when the default objects that we insert, all of them has a default center. So this is where we rotate. Oops, let's change that. We introduce some of the functions and the hotkeys for this. So when we rotate our object, it will rotate around that pivot point. As you can see here, that there's the dotted line going to the center, and it's almost like a center of gravity for the entire object. Uh, so, so this is where we kind of rotate from any view. We rotate around that center, even on an oblique view like this. So as you can see there. And now we have this 3D cursor. So wherever this 3D cursor is, our object will be added with its center lined up to the 3D cursor. And so if we change our pivot style to from, you can change it from down here. So pivot center, rotating and scaling. So that's another important thing, that it scales in respect to that center. So we can change from pivot center from a what they call bounding box center. So imagine the entire object becomes a box. So that's where the center would be. So, but if we change it, and these other pivot points uh, don't really use much, mainly you'll be using 3D cursor and bounding box center. So I won't go into too much details. So when you change it to a 3D cursor pivot point, you can see now that it pivots around the 3D cursor. So wherever you move your 3D cursor, it'll rotate around that. So this is very useful for when you kind of like animating, maybe a camera rotating around your model. So this is very useful instead of moving the camera out and rotating it 45 degrees on its own pivot point. So this is very useful. So I'm just gonna snap that back to center. As you can see here, you want to snap your cursor back to the center. Just go Shift S and cursor to center. But I recommend you getting the Blender hotkey cheat sheet from blenderguru.com. You can subscribe to him, and he will provide you generously with the Blender cheat sheet. I think that is very important. You can print it out, and then you can refer to it whenever you need. All right. So that's one object. What happens if you have two objects? How does Blender compute all the different pivot centers when you have two objects? Well, I have on my second layer here a second Suzanne, a red one. When I select one, when my pivot center is at the pivot point at the 3D cursor, you can see this axis lining up. And if I change it, now to change from cursor, a 3D cursor pivot center, to the pivot center, rotating point, sorry. I'm sure you get the point. Alright, so when you want to do that, you just press comma to change it to the center of the object, and period, or the full stop key to go to the 3D cursor. Same with this, nothing. Alright, nothing different. So alright, if we have click on selecting two of them by right click and shift right click, you can see what happened is Blender compute the center, the median way between the two pivot points is the center of this entire kind of like object. So just imagine this object fused into one. You would have a big circle, rectangle going around, and that will be the center of it. And so if you rotate it, now this one is not on 3D cursor, but you can see it's kind of rotating around the 3D cursor because I have positioned these two monkeys equal distance apart on each direction away from the 3D cursor. But if I just move this one unit to the right, you can see that the pivot center, the bounding box pivot center has shifted to the right. So it's nothing too complicated or complex in that idea. It's just median way between the pivot centers. So you can let's move this back one unit to the right. So you can see that our pivot center is to the right a little bit. But if we want to position it this way and actually pivot around this 3D cursor, you can just easily do that, and you see it's the axis here, snap back to the 3D cursor, and same thing happen. So that is basically it for this crash tooth. Stay tuned for more tutorials on Blender Amigos, and I'll see you next time.